The millionaire is surprised when black beggar prefers worker over wealth and power. Okay, so picture this. Richie Harrington, Wall Street king, right? Dude's used to closing billion-dollar deals before breakfast. Down on his luck, asks for change. Richie, out of nowhere, pulls out $100 bill. You'd think the guy won the lottery, right? Nope. Ethan refuses it. "No thanks, mister," he says, all calm and collected. "I'd rather have an honest day's work." He mentions he's been trying to get a job at Maureen's diner. Richie's mind is racing. He uses his connections, because duh, he's Richie Harrington, and gets Ethan a job at Maureen's. A week later, Richie finds himself at a diner, Maureen's diner. He watches Ethan clearing tables, smiling at customers, a completely different vibe. And then he sees Sarah from the gala. She's talking to Maureen and complimenting Ethan's work ethic. Richie's about to go say hello, but then he overhears Sarah and Ethan whispering. They're talking about some secret, something they're desperate to keep hidden. Ethan sees Richie, freezes, his smile vanishes, replaced with fear. What's Ethan hiding? What's Sarah's deal? Why is a guy who turned down $100 suddenly scared of a Wall Street tycoon? Richie's simple act of kindness has dragged him into a mess of secrets. But what are they hiding? And what lengths will they go to? Keep it buried? Ei, antes de continuarmos com essa história incrível, preciso te fazer um alerta importante. Muitos inscritos têm relatado que o YouTube removeu suas inscrições sem aviso. Dá só uma conferida rápida no botão vermelho aí embaixo para garantir que você ainda está inscrito no canal. Não quero que você perca nenhum conteúdo exclusivo que vem por aí. E já que você está aí, deixa aquele like poderoso que me ajuda muito com o algoritmo. Ah, e me conta nos comentários de qual cidade você está assistindo. Adoro conhecer cada pessoa incrível que faz parte dessa comunidade. Sua participação faz toda a diferença. Vamos interagir. Richie's mind went into overdrive. What the heck was going on? He casually walked past their table, pretending to check his phone. He caught snippets. The money. They can't find out. Never supposed to happen. Okay, this was officially weird. He walked outside, pulled out his phone, and called Barry, his go-to guy for, well, anything shady. "Barry, I need you to dig up everything you can on a guy named Ethan. Works at Maureen's diner, and a waitress named Sarah. Fast." The next day, Richie was back at Maureen's. He saw Ethan, looking even more stressed than before. Sarah wasn't there. Richie walked up to Ethan. "Hey, Ethan, mind if I ask you something?" Ethan jumped like he'd been electrocuted. "Mr. Harrington, what are you doing here?" "Just getting some coffee. You seem a little on edge. Everything okay?" Ethan started sweating. Yeah, fine, just busy." "Where's Sarah?" Richie asked casually. Ethan hesitated. She called in sick." Richie stared him down. Right. That afternoon, Barry called. "Richie, you are not going to believe this. Ethan, full name Ethan Blackwood, he's got a record, a long one. Fraud, petty theft, even a stint for attempted robbery." Richie swore under his breath. "And Sarah?" Barry paused. "Sarah's clean. But her real name isn't Sarah. It's Abigail. Abigail Blackwood, Ethan's sister." Richie's jaw dropped. Siblings with a criminal record? What were they up to? He drove back to Maureen's diner. He needed answers. He walked in, but this time, The place felt different. Empty, eerily silent. Then he saw it. A crumpled piece of paper on the floor, near the counter. He picked it up. It was a note, written in a shaky hand. "They know. We're out of time." He looked up, his blood turning to ice. He heard a noise from the back. Cautiously, he moved toward the kitchen. And that's when he saw her, Maureen, lying on the floor, dead, a single gunshot wound to the chest, and standing over her, gun still in hand, Sarah, or should I say Abigail. Her eyes were cold, empty. "It was her or us, Richie," she said, her voice flat. She knew too much. "It was her or us, Richie," she said, her voice flat. She knew too much. Richie couldn't breathe. Maureen? Dead? By Sarah, Abigail's hand. The world tilted. This wasn't some back-alley brawl. This was murder. What are you talking about?" Richie stammered, backing away. He felt like he was in a freaking nightmare. Abigail didn't flinch. "She found out about the money, Richie. The real money." "What money? Ethan turning down $100 because he's Mr. Honest suddenly involves millions?" Abigail's mouth twisted into a bitter smile. "That $100? Small change. What we're talking about is bigger. Way bigger." Maureen stumbled onto something. She saw the blueprints. She knew what was coming. Blueprints? Coming? What the hell was going on? Richie's head was spinning. Then Abigail did something that made his blood run colder than ice. She lowered the gun. "You know, Richie, I always thought you were just another suit. All flash, no substance. But you got Ethan a job. You cared. Maybe you're not one of them." "One of who, Abigail? Who are they?" She hesitated, her eyes darting around the diner. "They're everywhere, Richie. They control everything. They own this town, this country, maybe even the world." Richie stared at her. She sounded crazy, but the fear in her eyes, the genuine desperation, it was real. And that's when it hit him. The gala, the grand ballroom. That wasn't just a charity event. It was a meeting of the they Abigail was talking about. He'd seen faces there, faces he knew, faces that wielded unimaginable power. But it couldn't be. Conspiracy theories, right? This stuff only happened in movies. "Look," Richie said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Just tell me what's going on. Tell me everything." Abigail took a deep breath. "Okay. But you have to promise me. You have to promise me you'll believe me." And then she dropped the bomb. "Maureen wasn't just a diner owner, Richie. She was our mother." Richie's world exploded. Maureen, the sweet old lady who made the best apple pie he'd ever tasted. Their mother? Ethan and Abigail, siblings, both hiding criminal pasts, suddenly had a connection to a woman he respected. The woman Abigail just shot? "No," Richie whispered. "That's not possible." Abigail's eyes filled with tears. "It is, Richie, and she died trying to protect us. From them." Suddenly, sirens wailed in the distance. "They were coming. We have to go," Abigail said, grabbing his arm. "Now. They can't find us here." Richie hesitated. Leave? Leave Maureen's body lying on the floor? Become an accomplice to murder? But then he looked into Abigail's eyes, saw the desperation, the fear, the sliver of hope that he might actually be able to help. He made a decision. A terrible, life-altering decision. He nodded. Okay, let's go. As they slipped out the back door, Richie knew one thing for sure. His life would never be the same. He was now caught in something way bigger than himself. Something dark and dangerous. And he had no idea who he could trust anymore. Okay, let's go. As they slipped out the back door, Richie knew one thing for sure. His life would never be the same. He was now caught in something way bigger than himself. Something dark and dangerous. And he had no idea who he could trust anymore. The alley was grimy, reeking of garbage. Abigail was a whirlwind, pulling him forward. "We need to ditch my car. They'll be looking for it." "Where are we going?" Richie asked, his voice barely a whisper. The sirens were getting louder. Somewhere safe. For now. They found a cab idlingly, few blocks away. Abigail gave the driver an address uptown, a part of the city Richie barely knew. He stared out the window, the city lights blurring into a meaningless stream. Maureen, dead. It just didn't compute. The cab stopped in front of a run-down apartment building. Abigail paid the driver and practically dragged Richie inside. The place was a dive. Peeling paint, flickering lights, the smell of stale cigarette smoke. "Home sweet home," Abigail said, her voice laced with sarcasm. She led him up a creaky flight of stairs to a small, cramped apartment. The place was sparsely furnished, but clean. There were photos on a small table, snapshots of Abigail and Ethan, young and smiling. And there, in the middle, a faded picture of a woman who looked familiar. Maureen, Richie realized, his voice catching in his throat. Abigail nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. "Yeah, Mom." Richie sank into a worn armchair, his head spinning. He needed answers. He needed to understand. "Okay, Abigail, start from the beginning. Who are they? What money? What blueprints?" Abigail took a deep breath. It's a long story, Richie. A really messed up story," she started, talking, her voice low and urgent, telling him about a secret society, a group of powerful individuals who controlled everything from behind the scenes. The they she'd mentioned at the diner. They called themselves the Circle. "Mom found out about their plans," Abigail continued, her voice trembling. They're going to destroy the old buildings in this part of town, build luxury condos, push everyone out." Richie frowned. Real estate development? That was it? That was worth killing for? "It's not just about the buildings, Richie," Abigail snapped, her eyes blazing. "It's about the people, the families, who've lived here for generations. The Circle wants them gone. They see them as disposable." That's when Richie's phone rang. He glanced at the screen. It was Barry. He hesitated, then answered. "Richie, where are you, man? I've been trying to reach you all day. The cops are looking for you. They think you're involved in Maureen's murder." "Barry, listen to me," Richie said urgently. "I didn't do it. It was Abigail. But it's complicated." "Richie, what the hell is going on? You're talking crazy. Look, just turn yourself in. Let me handle this. I can get you a good lawyer." Suddenly, the line went dead. Richie stared at the phone in disbelief. "What's wrong?" Abigail asked, her voice tight with anxiety. "That was Barry. He said the cops think I did it." Abigail's eyes widened. "We have to get out of here. Now." Just then, the door burst open. Two men in black suits stormed into the apartment, guns drawn. "Police! Freeze!" Richie and Abigail froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. It was over. They were caught. But then, one of the men spoke again. "Don't worry, Mr. Harrington. We're not here to arrest you." He lowered his gun and gave Richie a chillingly familiar smile. "We're here to help." Richie stared at the man, his mind racing. He knew that smile. He'd seen it before. At the gala, the grand ballroom. You're one of them," Richie stammered, his voice barely audible. The man chuckled. "Welcome to the circle, Mr. Harrington." He gestured to the other man, who stepped forward and placed a hand on Abigail's shoulder. "And don't worry about your little friend here. We have plans for her too," Abigail screamed, but it was too late. The man pressed a cloth over her mouth, and her eyes rolled back in her head. She went limp in his arms. Richie watched in horror as they carried Abigail out of the apartment, her body lifeless. He tried to move, to stop them, but the other man held him back, his grip like steel. "You're one of us now, Mr. Harrington," the man said, his voice cold and devoid of emotion. "And you will do as you're told." As they dragged him out of the apartment, Richie saw something on the floor, near the doorway. A small, crumpled piece of paper. He recognized it. Instantly. It was the note he'd found at Maureen's diner. The note that Abigail had written. But there was something different about it now. Something he hadn't noticed before. Scrawled in tiny letters, almost invisible to the naked eye, were two words. Two words that changed everything. Trust Barry. As they dragged him out of the apartment, Richie saw something on the floor, near the doorway. A small, crumpled piece of paper. He recognized it instantly. It was the note he'd found at Maureen's diner. The note that Abigail had written. But there was something different about it now. Something he hadn't noticed before. Scrawled in tiny letters, almost invisible to the naked eye, were two words. Two words that changed everything. Trust Barry. The black car sped through the city streets. Richie was crammed in the back, his hands zip-tied, a splitting headache throbbing behind his eyes. The man who'd smiled. What was his name? Sims, he thought, was in the passenger seat, flipping through channels on the radio. "Where are you taking me?" Richie croaked, his throat dry. Sims just chuckled, a low, menacing sound. "Somewhere you can be useful, Mr. Harrington. After all, you're one of us now." The city gave way to dark, winding roads. They were heading out of town, towards... Richie didn't know. He tried to think, to plan, but his mind was a jumbled mess. Maureen, dead. Abigail, gone. Trust Barry? What the hell did that even mean? The car finally screeched to a halt in front of a massive, gated estate. Lights blazed. Security cameras swiveled. This wasn't just some rich guy's house. This was a fortress. They hauled Richie out of the car and through the gates. He was led into a lavishly decorated room. All velvet and gold, like something out of a movie. Sitting at a long, mahogany table were them. The faces from the gala, the power brokers, the circle. At the head of the table sat a man with piercing blue eyes, a man Richie recognized immediately. Senator Caldwell, one of the most influential politicians in the country. Caldwell smiled, a chillingly polite smile. "Welcome, Richie. We've been expecting you." Richie's stomach dropped. This was it. He was trapped. "What do you want from me?" Richie asked, his voice shaking. Caldwell chuckled. "We want you to be part of something bigger, Richie. Something important. You see, we have plans for this city, for this country, and we need people like you to help us." "Help you? Destroy people's lives?" Richie spat. "Is that what you call it?" Caldwell's smile vanished. His eyes turned cold. "You're in no position to judge, Richie. You made a choice. You helped Abigail escape. You're complicit now." Suddenly, the doors to the room burst open. Everyone turned. Standing in the doorway, gun drawn, was Barry. "Hold it right there!" Barry yelled, his voice echoing through the room. Richie stared, his jaw slack. "Barry? Here? How? Barry, what is the meaning of this?" Caldwell demanded, his voice laced with anger. Barry didn't flinch. "It's over, Caldwell. I know everything." That's when the real shock hit. Caldwell didn't look angry. He looked amused. "Barry, my boy," Caldwell said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Always playing the hero. You almost had me fooled. Almost." He gestured to one of the men in the room. The man stepped forward and pulled off a mask. Underneath was Ethan. Ethan, Abigail's brother. Ethan, who'd turned down $100. Ethan, who'd seemed so lost. Ethan smiled, a cruel, calculating smile. "Sorry, Richie. You were just a pawn in our game." Richie's world tilted on its axis. Ethan, working with them? But Abigail, Richie stammered. Ethan laughed. "Abigail? Oh, she's good, really good. But she's just an actress, Richie. And a damn good one at that." Caldwell stood up, his eyes burning into Richie's soul. "You see, Richie, we knew Maureen was getting suspicious. So we sent in Ethan and Abigail to handle her. And they did. They played their parts perfectly." "It was all a lie?" Richie whispered, his voice barely audible. "Every single bit of it," Caldwell said, his voice cold. "And you, Richie, you fell for it hook, line, and sinker. But it wasn't over. It was all a lie?" "It was all a lie?" Richie whispered, his voice barely audible. "Every single bit of it," Caldwell said, his voice cold. "And you, Richie, you fell for it hook, line, and sinker. But it wasn't over. Barry, how could he have been so blind? Trust Barry? It was a joke. A sick, twisted joke. He felt like his brain was going to explode. Then something happened. Something that stopped time. Something no one could have seen coming. Barry, who'd been standing there frozen, suddenly lunged forward. Not at Caldwell, not at Ethan. At himself. He jammed the gun under his chin. "I'm so sorry," Barry screamed, tears streaming down his face. And then, bang! The sound ripped through the room, shattering the silence. Barry's body crumpled to the floor. Blood splattered everywhere. The circle members recoiled in shock. Even Caldwell looked stunned. Richie couldn't breathe. Barry? Dead by his own hand? What the hell was going on? Ethan, recovering quickly, barked orders. "Clean this up, now, and get rid of Harrington. He knows too much. Two men grabbed Richie, dragging him toward a side door. He was too numb to resist. What was the point? Everyone he'd trusted was either dead or had betrayed him. As they shoved him through the door, he stumbled, falling to his knees. He looked back, one last time, at the scene of the carnage. And that's when he saw it. Lying next to Barry's lifeless hand, glinting in the dim light, was a cell phone. A burner phone. And on the screen, barely visible, was a single, unread text message. He strained his eyes, trying to make out the words. The message was short, cryptic. The Circle knows. He's compromised. Activate Protocol Omega. Richie's mind raced. Protocol Omega? What the hell was that? And who sent the message? The men yanked him to his feet, shoving him out the door. He knew one thing for sure. Whatever game was being played, it was far from over. And somehow, he had to find a way to figure out what Protocol Omega was, and who he could actually trust. If anyone, because if Barry was compromised, who else was? And what did this all mean? The black car sped through the city streets. Richie was crammed in the back, his hands zip-tied, a splitting headache throbbing behind his eyes. Sims, that was his name, Sims, was in the passenger seat, humming along to some elevator music on the radio. "Where are you taking me?" Richie croaked, his throat feeling like sandpaper. Sims just chuckled. "Somewhere you can be useful, Mr. Harrington. After all, you're one of us now." The city lights faded, replaced by dark, winding roads. They were heading out of town, towards nowhere good. Richie tried to focus, to think, but his brain was a scrambled egg. Maureen, gone. Abigail, who the hell even was she? Trust Barry? The irony stung. The car finally screeched to a halt in front of a monstrous, gated estate. Floodlights blazed, cameras swiveled on their robotic necks. This wasn't just some rich dude's mansion. This was a compound. They dragged Richie out of the car, through the gates. He was shoved into a room that screamed old money. Velvet drapes, gilded mirrors, the whole 9 yards. Around a ridiculously long mahogany table sat them, the gala guys, the silent puppet masters, the Circle. At the head of the table, Senator Caldwell, looking every bit the snake he was. Caldwell gave him that sickeningly smooth smile. "Welcome, Richie. We've been expecting you." Richie's stomach turned inside out. This was it. "What do you want?" Richie managed, his voice barely above a whisper. Caldwell's smile tightened. "We want you to be part of something bigger, Richie. Something important. We have plans and we need people like you." "Plans to destroy lives?" Richie spat. "Is that what you call it?" Caldwell's eyes narrowed. "You're in no position to judge, Richie. You made your bed. You helped Abigail. You're in this with us now." The doors flew open. All eyes snapped to the entryway. Barry, standing there, gun raised, face contorted with rage. "Freeze! This is over," Barry roared, his voice bouncing off the opulent walls. Richie was floored. "Barry? How? What? Barry, what is the meaning of this?" Caldwell sneered, but there was a tremor in his voice. Barry didn't waver. "It's over, Caldwell. I know everything." And then the other shoe dropped. Caldwell didn't look scared. He looked almost pitying. "Barry, my boy, Caldwell said, his voice like ice. Always the martyr. You almost had me fooled. Almost. He nodded to one of the other guys. The guy stepped forward and ripped off a mask. Ethan. That two-faced little worm, Ethan. Ethan grinned. A cold, dead-eyed grin. Sorry, Richie. You were just a useful idiot. Richie's head swam. Ethan, working with them? But Abigail. Abigail. Richie choked out. Ethan laughed. Abigail? A natural. Trust me. An actress, Richie. That's all. But Oscar-worthy. I tell ya, she is good. Caldwell rose to his feet, his gaze drilling into Richie. You see, Richie, Maureen was becoming problematic. So we sent in Ethan and Abigail to take care of things. And they did. Perfectly. All according to plan. It was all a lie? Richie whispered, the words catching in his throat. Every last syllable, Caldwell confirmed, his voice dripping with contempt. And you, Richie, you bought it. Lock, stock, and barrel. But that wasn't it. Not even close. There was more. Richie could feel it in his bones. Suddenly, the room began to spin. The faces blurred. A ringing filled his ears. He gasped for breath, clutching at his chest. What's happening to me? Richie stammered, his vision tunneling. Caldwell smiled, a truly terrifying smile. A little side effect, Richie. We knew you wouldn't come willingly. Let's just say you've been prepared. Ethan stepped closer, his eyes glinting with malice. You see, Richie, we needed your connections, your money, but we couldn't risk you turning on us, so we ensured your loyalty. Richie's knees buckled. He was dying. He was actually dying. And then, through the haze, he saw it, on a screen. Built into the table, a live feed. Abigail. She was strapped to a chair, a gag in her mouth, her eyes wide with terror. But that wasn't the worst part. Beside her stood a figure, shrouded in shadow. And then the figure stepped into the light. It was Maureen, alive, and smiling. Surprise, Richie, she said, her voice smooth as silk. Did you really think it would be that easy? Richie's world shattered. Maureen, alive, working with them? It couldn't be. It just couldn't be. But there she was, a monster in his nightmare. But why? Richie croaked, his voice a ragged whisper. Maureen's smile widened. Power, Richie. Control. And you were the perfect pawn. The rich, gullible fool who would do anything for a pretty face. She gestured to the screen. Say goodbye, Richie. It's been interesting. On the screen, Maureen raised a gun. Abigail screamed, a muffled, desperate sound. And then the screen went black. Richie's heart stopped. He closed his eyes, waiting for the end. But it didn't come. Instead, he felt a hand on his shoulder. He opened his eyes. Standing beside him was Sims. Come with me, Mr. Harrington, Sims said, his voice surprisingly gentle. I think it's time you knew the truth. And as Sims led him out of the room, Richie knew one thing for sure. He hadn't even scratched the surface of this twisted game. And whatever the truth was, it was going to be more horrifying than anything he could have ever imagined. And he was the main player for his family to make it out alive. And he was the main player for his family to make it out alive. Sims led him down a long, winding corridor. The air grew colder, the lighting dimmer. This wasn't the opulent part of the estate. This was something else. Where are we? Going? Richie asked, his voice echoing in the sterile hallway. Sims didn't answer. He just kept walking, his face unreadable. They reached a heavy steel door. Sims punched in a code, and the door hissed open, revealing a small, windowless room. Inside, a single chair sat under a harsh overhead light. Sims gestured for Richie to sit. He hesitated, then obeyed. "What is this place?" Richie asked, his heart pounding in his chest. Sims finally spoke, his voice low and serious. "This is where we show you the truth, Mr. Harrington. The real truth." He walked over to a wall and pressed a button. A screen flickered to life, displaying a video feed. Richie stared at the screen, his blood running cold. It was a recording of him from earlier that day. He was at Maureen's diner, talking to Ethan. But something was different. He watched himself hand Ethan the $100 bill. He watched Ethan refuse it. He watched their conversation, except the audio was different. He heard Ethan saying things he hadn't actually said. He heard himself responding in ways he didn't remember. The video continued, showing his interactions with Abigail, with Barry. Each time, the audio was manipulated, distorted. He was being framed. "What is this?" Richie stammered. "This is fake. This isn't what happened." Sims nodded. "Exactly, Mr. Harrington. It's not what happened. It's what they want you to believe happened." The video ended and the screen went black. Sims turned to Richie, his eyes filled with a strange mixture of pity and determination. "The Circle. They control everything, Mr. Harrington. Information, power, perception. They can make anyone believe anything. And they were planning to make you the scapegoat, the fall guy for everything." Richie stared at Sims, his mind reeling. "But why? Why would they do this?" Sims sighed. "Because you were a threat, Mr. Harrington. You were an outsider. You weren't one of them, and they couldn't control you. So they decided to eliminate you and use you to cover their tracks." "But Maureen," Richie whispered, "and Abigail." Sims shook his head. "Abigail? She's not who you think she is. She's been working for us for years. A deep cover operative." Richie's head spun. "Working for who? For you?" Sims smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "No, Mr. Harrington, not for me. For something much bigger." He walked over to the door and opened it. Standing in the hallway were two figures. One was a woman, tall, elegant, with piercing blue eyes. She looked familiar. The other was a man, older, with a kind face and a gentle smile. He looked impossibly familiar. Richie stared at them, his jaw dropping. He knew them. He knew them both. "Mom?" Richie whispered, his voice barely audible. The woman smiled. "Hello, Richie. It's been a long time." And then the man stepped forward, and Richie's world exploded. "Gad?" Richie stammered, his eyes wide with disbelief. But you're dead." "I saw you die!" His father smiled sadly. "It was a long time ago, son. A lot of things you think you know aren't true." Then his dad said, his voice shaking, "Son, I'm not actually your dad. I was a paid actor. You see, Richie, you are the selected one. You are the only person to stop the circle. The truth is, son, you are an alien." "Son, I'm not actually your dad. I was a paid actor. You see, Richie, you are the selected one. You are the only person to stop the circle. The truth is, son, you are an alien." The room swam. Alien? He was an alien? It was too much. Way too much. He felt like he was going to throw up. What are you talking about? Richie stammered, his voice cracking. He looked from the guy who wasn't his dad to the woman who was his mom, searching for some kind of explanation, some sign that this was all a really, really bad joke. But their faces were deadly serious. "It's true, Richie," his mom said, her voice soft. "You were sent here from another planet. A planet far, far away. Your real parents, they knew the circle was coming. They knew they would try to take over Earth, and they knew you were the only one who could stop them." Richie's head was spinning. He was an alien? Sent to Earth to save it from what? The circle? It sounded like something out of a bad sci-fi movie. But I don't have any superpowers. I'm just me, Richie Harrington, a Wall Street guy. The man who wasn't his dad chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "You haven't unlocked your potential yet, son. But it's there. Trust me, it's inside of you, and we're here to help you unleash it." Suddenly, the lights flickered, the ground rumbled, an alarm blazed through the compound. "They know we're here," his mom said, her voice tight with fear. "We have to go, now." Sim stepped forward, his gun drawn. "We don't have much time. They'll be here any second." He grabbed Richie's arm, pulling him towards a hidden door in the wall. "Come on, Richie. We have to get you somewhere safe, somewhere you can learn the truth about who you really are." As they raced through the corridors, Richie struggled to process everything he was hearing. He was an alien. The circle was trying to take over Earth. His parents weren't his parents, and he was the only one who could stop them. It was insane. Utterly, completely insane. They burst out of the compound, into the cold night air. A helicopter waited for them, its blades whirring. As they climbed aboard, Richie looked back at the estate, at the flashing lights, at the chaos and confusion. He knew his old life was over. He knew he was heading into the unknown. And he knew, deep down, that everything was about to change. But as the helicopter lifted off, as they soared above the city lights, he felt something else. A flicker of excitement, a sense of purpose, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, he was finally ready to embrace his destiny. Then he saw something that made his blood run cold. On the wing of the helicopter, a small, almost invisible symbol, a circle, and inside the circle, a tiny, writhing snake. He looked at Sims, at the man he thought was his father, at the woman he thought was his mother. Their faces were blank, unreadable. Were they telling the truth? Or was this just another lie? Another level of manipulation? He had no idea who to trust anymore. And as the helicopter flew on, into the darkness, Richie knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning, and the stakes were higher than he could have ever imagined. And what was that snake? The chopper sliced through the night. His parents? Aliens? It felt like a fever dream. Richie stared at his hands, turning them over, searching for something. Scales? Antennae? Nothing. Just Richie Harrington. Or so, he thought. Then the engine sputtered. Smoke poured from the vents. The pilot yelled something unintelligible over the roar. "We're going down!" his mom screamed, grabbing Richie's arm. The chopper plunged, twisting and turning. Richie braced for impact, fear clawing at his throat. This was it, the end of everything. But then, a jolt. The chopper leveled out, skimming the treetops. The pilot fought for control, his face slick with sweat. "We're hit! Someone's tracking us!" Sims yelled, peering out the window. Suddenly, the comm system crackled to life. A voice, cold and familiar, filled the cabin. "Richie, Richie, you can't escape us. You belong to the Circle." It was Caldwell. Richie's blood froze. They were surrounded. There was no escape. His mom looked at him, her eyes filled with desperation. "Richie, you have to focus. You have to unlock your abilities." "But I don't know how," Richie cried, his voice cracking. "Think, Richie, what makes you different? What makes you?" He closed his eyes, searching for something, anything. He thought about Maureen, her apple pie, her kindness. He thought about Abigail, her lies, her pain. He thought about Barry, his sacrifice, his last trust. Barry. And then it hit him. He wasn't just a Wall Street guy. He had intuition, a gut feeling, a knack for seeing through BS. It wasn't much, but it was something. He focused that feeling, that intuition, that power, and aimed it at the controls of the helicopter. The chopper lurched, defying gravity. The pilot gaped, his mouth open in astonishment. They were flying again, faster, higher than before. "What did you do?" his mom gasped. Richie didn't know. He just did it. He looked out the window. The moon hung heavy in the sky. And then he saw it. A shadow following them. A jet emblazoned with the Circle's symbol, the snake. They were still being hunted. Then, as he struggled to understand that symbol and what it meant, he saw his reflection in the window. For just an instant, there were scales on his face, reptilian eyes staring back at him. And the symbol he saw on his face told him, more than anything, there was more to the Circle, more to his heritage, more to everything than he could possibly imagine. But what does it all mean? Hey, you gotta know what happens next, right? You need to find out the truth about Richie, about the Circle, about everything. So listen up, because this is important. You need to subscribe now. Don't even think about missing the next chapter of this crazy story. The truth is waiting, but you gotta be subscribed to see it. Smash that like button like your life depends on it. This is how you tell the algorithm that you want more. It's time to show your support and help the channel. I want to hear your thoughts about everything. Theories, your reactions, your everything. What did you think of that ending? Who do you trust? Let me know. Share this video with at least 5 friends right now. Seriously, don't wait. Spread the word and bring them into this wild ride. They need to see this. Only true fans understand the importance of these actions. This is your moment to show your support and keep this story alive. Don't wait another second. Do it now, or you might just miss the next piece of the puzzle. And trust me, you don't want to do that.